In theory, we haven't done this for a little while, so let's cross our fingers and hope this all works and I haven't broken YouTube over Christmas. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm not sure how long I have to continue saying that. This will probably be the last time. I'm Alan, and with me are the rest of the Anchore open source team, including Alex, Will, and Keith. There may be more joining later. We'll talk to them in just a moment. We do this every Thursday where we review some pull requests, issues, discussions, questions, all kinds of stuff to do with the open source tools that these wonderful people maintain at Anchore, including Syft and Grype, and some other tools as well. Feel free to ask questions. You can also find us on Discourse. I'll show you that in just a minute. And you can ask questions there. We post a regular thread there, and you'll find us there all the time. So you can also find all the code, the important bit, over here on GitHub, which you'll find github.com/Anchor. All the projects are on there, and there's a lot of them. But the two main ones that we tend to talk about most are Syft and Grype, but we often branch out to some of the other tools as well. There's a couple of GitHub Actions and some other libraries and tools. There's all kinds of stuff in there. Hello, everyone. That you lot. This is the first time we've done this for a while, so we're a bit rusty. I started a thread and I said on that one that we'll talk about needs discussion stuff. I actually started another thread the other day on Discourse where I thought, let's just have a review of what needs discussion, because every so often we do one of these live streams and there's stuff that we've already talked about, and I thought, we should probably review these. And very kindly, a few people have left replies and said, here's some things we need to discuss. So excellent. Thank you, Will, and thank you, Tim. I know Tim's not here, but he'll be watching this later. So where do we want to start? Does anyone have a specific one they want to start with, or anything anyone wants to mention before we get going on the usual suspects?
I just love that we have a needs discussion. So it's a good way to kick off the year with a meta discussion. So,
well, actually, I could go one level deeper. I need to have a discussion with you about the needs discussion post about the needs discussion issues, because I'm thinking about whether I should do this on a regular basis. Like every Monday, should I do a post this, or should I edit this post? I could make this post a wiki, and then anyone could edit. If I hit make wiki, then anyone could edit this, and we could just keep it nice and tidy. Or is that pointless because we've actually got all the data over here? I just wanted some way for us to have a little, post on here that's nice and tidy and compact. I don't know. What do you think?
I think one of the things that the GitHub link doesn't have is a way of marking a discourse thread as needs discussion, which I sometimes do. So I there's a tag in Discourse called discussion, I think. And there's one I replied on here with a Discourse thread that
right, so we could put a thing down here that is threads for discussion, and then just link them all in there,
but I mean, Discourse. I think a better way to keep the view clean is to link to the search results, right? Because then you don't have to edit the points.
Yes.
Yeah, just link to the search results. And I think there's a tag in Discourse, whatever Discourse calls tags. I think it calls them tags, that I sometimes use for discussion. And then there's also the I don't know how tags
discuss. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. It's called discuss. Sorry.
Yeah. So if I just do discuss, then you can search for. I think it's there. You go. Tag/discuss. So I could link to that. Is that what you're suggesting? Link to GitHub,
yeah. You could link to that, and you could link to the GitHub view that's open on your next tab, and then you can just periodically remind us in the same thread to go make sure that we actually want to talk about these things. And it was a good call out. Keith and I spent spent about an hour going through and being like, "Oh, we talked about this already. Oh, what even is this? This seems really stale." And so, if we unlabeled
Superb.
your favorite issue, I apologize. Ping me on Discourse and I'll do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're like, if you were doing a separate post for this, like, that would be valuable if we're trying to, like, historically keep which ones like were at that point in time what we were discussing, as opposed to like a live thing, which is like, well, that we just need to know at the top of this week, and we don't necessarily care about last week, right? So
yeah, I like that.
Well, then, would it be more beneficial to just put this out on the Monday and put it down here in topics and just link? I already linked to needs discussion and just break out pull request topics things, and then you've got one of those, and I don't have to do anything.
yeah, I mean, I'd say the easier the better. So yeah,
okay, that's the easier, because I've already got a template for that, and then I can just okay, I'll do that. That's nice and easy. Thank you, and we will get off the meta discussion about needs discussion and actually do the discussion, shall we? Where do you want to start?
The first one, like, we, in terms of like the needs discussion stuff, like the wrong traffic RC versions of binary detection. Me and Keith were chatting about this one earlier this week. Figure we maybe continue that discussion.
Go for it.
So, okay. This issue is specifically talking about, hey, we have a traffic binary classifier. So the binary cataloger is picking up on it, but it's also being picked up on by the Golang cataloger, sometimes. And one of the conclusions in this thread was, hey, tweak the regex for the binary cataloger for this particular classifier, because it was wrong. But me and Keith started talking a little more about it. It's like, well, we have this weird situation where we have a Golang cataloger and we have a binary cataloger. They're both finding the same thing. So we're kind of in this deduping situation. Now, usually we would say, go to the expert cataloger and defer to it. And so usually that's like the ecosystem cataloger. In this case, the Golang cataloger knows best. In this situation, the Golang cataloger does not know best, because sometimes it cops out and it says, I couldn't find any metadata in the binary in like the known build info section, or it could, and it didn't actually have a tag. And it just has a pseudo version. So 0.0.0 dash some metadata. Thus, it kind of cops out, and it does this like search for something that looks like a semver in the binary. And that's actually not as good as what the binary cataloger does, which is it has a traffic regex already tailored in there, which isn't just a simple look for a semver. It's looking for some other anchor points in the binary to center around, so it gets a more accurate result. So we don't have this great defer to the ecosystem cataloger rule of thumb in this particular case. So this brought up some other sub threads, which is like, well, do we want to merge these? Do we want to drop one? What's the deduplication here? And also, which one would we even pick to deduplicate? So that's like the high level, what this is and kind of what discussions it started to spawn off. I don't know if anybody has any, or Keith, if you have any other recollections or things you wanted to add on.
I mean, not in particular, but yeah, that's a good summary of the problem. That, like, in this case, the expert cataloger is worse than the binary cataloger, which is, usually not the case. It's usually the other way around.
Sorry, go ahead, Keith. I thought
No, go for it.
I was going to say, is this a special property of the Go cataloger? Because Go has this problem, for everyone following along at home, where Go fetches, like when you build a binary, Go embeds all the dependencies in the binary, and it leaves metadata in the binary saying what it got. And it has version data for all of those because it uses version control tags to fetch them, right? So when you do like go get github.com/traffic/ parser spelled wrong at v0.1.4, like it's actually getting the git tag, and so like it knows the version. But there's like what's the main module problem, right? Where like the main module was fetched from local disk, not by a source control tag. And so there's no information about what version the main module has encoded into the Go binary. So we know, like, in a sense, we know the version of everything else, but the Go cataloger doesn't have a good sense of what the version of the binary is. And some people set like version equals like you can use like the LD flags variable or whatever. Like people do stuff to embed a version in the binary. But the Go compiler itself does not have a standardized way of embedding the version of the main module yet, I think is where Alex.
Yeah, exactly. It's already in the 1.24 unofficial release notes. So actually, it's like it is definitely going to be in 1.24, which is great. And honestly, like there was at least a small part of me that wanted to say, don't have to think about this anymore. 1.24 will solve this, and I can move on with life. But it doesn't solve the problem that the user's really talking about, which is like, I have historically all of these things built in the past that are already in these container images. I'm not going to go rebuild them all again because 1.24 came out, Go 1.24
Right.
that is. So I feel like it's still not enough of a reason to say like it won't be a problem in the future because we still have all these historical artifacts.
Right. And people like something. Right. Go makes these nice little self-contained working executables that you can copy into your containers forever and ever, and they'll probably still keep working fine, however good or bad an idea that is. So we absolutely do need to keep caring about that. I wonder, like, I guess one of the things I want to understand is like, where do we want to go with the discussion? So we could talk about like the general problem of like merging packages that are the same package in some sense. We already do that today. Some, like if you do apt-get install MySQL, right? Then we find a D package called MySQL, we find a binary called MySQL, and we just drop the binary because there's not any information in there that's not in the D package. But with the Go one, we don't. So maybe should we discuss this as like a general case of merging overlapping packages?
I mean, this is okay. So the one answer is yes. I want to say yes because the next one if I pop off the stack a little bit, I go back to the top of like Alan's question of what do I want to discuss? This was one of the topics. The other topic is Syft 3485, which is kind of exactly what you're clicking on, which is, okay, so what are the ways that we want to be able to say packages can and should be merged? And how do we want to express that? This has come up in a few different ways, but this one's got a needs discussion on it because it's just kind of it could touch the user config. It could touch like how we express a package and its metadata, whether it be join, it could be dropping behavior. And it could be a bit of a beast, like depending on what we do. And there's also options where we can do it in Syft 1.0 and a non-breaking mode. And there's ways that we can do it where we wait until 2.0 when we make breaking changes. But the previous issue that we were just talking about is potentially a concrete example of what this will be talking about.
Right.
Is there do we not have a capability to say like verbose mode, show me everything?
It's kind of what we do today.
Yeah. So
Today is like, show me everything.
Not in Will's example where he said if we see the D package and we see the MySQL binary, we drop the binary because we can see the package.
That's a specific. Right now we have like one setting that basically means like if I find a binary classifier package, which basically means we're doing strings pipe grep on the package to guess what on the executable to guess what it is. Like if I find one of those, that's kind of a low confidence package. And then if I also find a D package and the D package owns the path where the regex matched, then we say like, okay, it looks like you did apt-get install curl. And so we're going to assume that But like one of the drawbacks is that it does the merge by delete. So you can turn that off, and then you'll just look at the SBOM and you'll see a binary package called curl at user bin curl and a D package called curl at wherever D package writes those things down. And like if you look at the files, you can be like, oh, these overlap. These own some of the same files in the SBOM, but that's sort of your only hint that they're the same package in some sense. But I think there are lots of like relatedness between packages, right? Like another one is it's reasonably common for the distro package manager to bundle language ecosystem packages, right? You could yum install a Ruby gem or apt-get install a pip package in very many cases. I mean, those packages are both present, and right now they just both show up as if they both exist. And that can confuse Grype because sometimes the distro has made an additional patch over the upstream PyPy version to like fix a particular thing. And so guessing whether that has been done is hard. Sorry, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, no. You've explained it well. Thank you. So those kind of cases, like there's a few of those kind of cases, like where someone's done apt install Python 3 pip, right? And they get Python 3 pip. And then one of the later stages, they do pip update or upgrade or whatever it is. And so they get a new version of pip that replaces the one that the distro installed because they want the latest pip or something like that, or probably more libraries like, something like, PyTorch or something like that. But then there's also the go and get the source code and build the thing as part of your container build process, and you replace the distro installed binary that you needed to bootstrap, like curl, for example, and you replace curl with a home built curl. And then you've got like the packaged curl, and you've got this random binary that appeared out of nowhere that isn't actually the one that came from. And those kind of things, I guess, are harder to like unpick.
It's hard to guess what the right default is for like everybody.
Right. Yes.
And that's where like we think for that reason there's some user configuration that's kind of due with this work, because somebody might say, no, I know I've got Python packages packaged by RPMs, but you know what? The RPMs are right. And we might have other folks that say, yeah, I know I have Python packages packaged with RPMs, but it's, the Python packages are the ones with the correct information. And the RPMs are just like these empty shells of things. So I don't care about the RPMs per se. And I think we can find folks on both sides of that spectrum.
Yeah.
So having a config option for that just kind of makes sense. So like in this boat, we have like, okay, what are the ways that we want to detect when to merge? Do we even want to merge? Maybe some of these are drop behavior, but like stuff. I think Keith and I, we had some discussions before the break. Seems like a year ago. That was like, what do we do with the metadata? So if I take two packages, so one was from an RPM, one was for a Python package, and I want to quote unquote merge them, I think the very next thing that we would want to figure out is, well, I have fields in the metadata, which like the metadata need to be preserved. And so how do we keep both metadatas around? And then another one is like, what if I have fields up in the top part of the package? So think like Perl, CPE, licenses, etc. They should be merged. And like of the subset of those, you have lists of things like licenses. Those are more easily mergeable because you could take two lists to make a giant list. But then you have things that are not easily mergeable, like Perl. It's a singular field. If they differ, then like it's kind of a too bad situation. So there's all these different things to solve when it comes to merging and what we decide there. Right. So I mean, maybe to rein in, like, so what's there to discuss? Part of it is trying to buy into the notion that is this a Syft 1.0 capability? Like, could we do this in Syft 1.0 without breaking anybody. And if not, then we can actually defer this discussion almost entirely to Syft 2.0 just down the road. That seems like a good place to start. And maybe a lot of the other things will kind of fall out of it.
If I were to wax philosophical about how I might add something to what we have today to make this kind of scenario better, like the first thing that would come to mind for me at least would be like some kind of a you know like a trust factor or a weight or whatever for like how good a package result is, right? And so like it would be based on each individual thing. So like in this example that we started with the Golang, if it's something it picked up, let's say it found a 1.24 Go version and or a Go, format, and it found a main module version, like that's a pretty high confidence. And then like that would be a pretty, large number or whatever, I guess, in that parlance. But if it had to go all the way down to like scanning the bytes in the binary with a really broad regex, it would say, oh, this is a pretty low, a really low confidence match, let's say. And so in the case of like, let's say that did it, and then there's another binary classifier that had something, the confidence probably still isn't going to be real high on the binary classifier, but if it was such a way that was higher than the, this last ditch effort that the Go cataloger is doing, we might have a way to like at least determine which is the right one to keep in, in some of those scenarios. And if we had something like that, that might mean that we need less configuration because we're doing maybe more of the right thing along the way.
I think one of the interesting things about that is that the idea like is weight or confidence really like a scalar, like a single scalar quantity, right? Can we just say this is confidence 0.5, this is confidence 0.7 wins? And the reason I ask that is like the case that brought this up, the Go cataloger versus the binary classifier cataloger. Like the Go cataloger is like perfectly confident about the name of the main module and has no information about its version. And so like I don't know how to make that into a general weight. I wonder, like one of the things I was thinking of, like if we push this off to 2.0, then like right now, the contract between Syft and all Syft's catalogers is all Syft's catalogers return packages. And let's imagine for a second that all the catalogers return package evidence. And then there's some post-processing step that sort of tries to build a set of like sort of more abstract package objects out of all the available evidence. And then so you would end up with like traffic, and you could say like, okay, so we found the traffic main module from the Go cataloger and we guessed its version from the binary classifier, and this is the like compound package. That's sort of my mental model. And then it's sort of like puzzling it out almost like field wise, right? Where like the package really does have sort of two versions, and two, like if you do like apt-get install Python 3 pip, right? You really do have a Python package called pip that's really there. But you also really have a D package, and they have like different versions in Perls. And so I wonder if there's like a sort of, I don't know, overall package with evidence for it. And so then the overall package has like potentially like, it's almost like a cluster of the packages today that all like, they all own the same files and share like files and names. And so a human might think of them as different views of the same package, but then the different catalogers provide different types of evidence for the package, if that makes sense.
In this like 2.0 realm, maybe like the catalogers are only raising up the evidence. I think the first question I would have is like, well, is that like, so evidence is not a package.
Maybe in
And then-
evidence, yeah.
And there's also relationships too. Like the catalog would also raise up like the packages and like how they relate to one another. So it'd be evidence would do the same thing, evidence and how it relates to one another. It brings up more questions for me, I think.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. So yeah. I can see how it brings up more questions. I'll defer. Go ahead.
Well, because it kind of brings up a parallel thread to this, like if we just talk about I have, whether it be evidence or packages, both kind of apply here. If I have relationships between packages or evidence, and we decide to merge them downstream, like we have more questions about like, well, should them like, so we know that we're going to need to clean up relationships, so to speak. So if I had, so package A and package B, and one's we know is going to subsume the other, but they're all part of their own different dependency graphs. I think what we're saying is if one is subsuming the other, the package graphs also merge in that sense. And
Yeah.
And if that's true, does that mean that would we ever want a capability where we're saying, well, if I find that the whole, I think we would want to do things like detecting if that whole package graph is really duplicated across two ecosystems. Like I got 20 RPMs and 20 Python packages, and they're all like duped in this sense. If we merge them together, we don't want to have 40 relationships that still exist. We still just want 20 probably.
That makes sense. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Keith.
I would just say that we could pretty easily deduplicate relationships too. I mean, if for argument's sake, if we deduplicated the packages to the same package, we would probably point the relationships at this new thing. We would end up with, like you said, maybe twice the number of relationships that we would see we had duplicates, and that should be something that we just get rid of. I don't really see too much of a problem with that myself. It's like
I think it works, and like we just have to detect when we have duplicate edges, but like I think it would all work just fine. It kind of brings up, it reminds me of the discussion about wanting, so in Syft 2.0, there's been the discussion about like, hey, well, we don't know if we actually want to raise up, have the catalogers return packages and relationships directly, but instead they write into like an SBOM writer interface. This came up in other discussions about like, oh, what if we had like a SQLite like spool writer or something along those lines? And so the same sense, we could have that object behind the scene be responsible for that. Hey, I found duplicate links next to one another, and then reconcile that either at time or deferred fashion, as opposed to having to like collect all the things and then like in piecewise like try to figure out they all should get merged together.
Yeah. That also briefly touches on the thing I was hoping to discuss today, which is like people are using Syft and Grype to scan whole VMs, and that is challenging because they make an in-memory index of the whole file system, and the whole SBOM has to be in memory at once. So if you have a giant server with 11 billion things on it, then you need 11 billion RAM, and that's expensive.
Yes.
So
is that one of the things that's on the list to discuss, or is it just
that's the top of the discourse thread to discuss. But so I think that this sort of relates, because one of the big things we could do there is like stream the SBOM to disk as it's being built, like or like have like that because like the necessity to have sort of the whole result of the scan in memory is a limiting factor here if you get a file system that's too big. So anyway, I don't want to hijack too much. That just like if we can like the spooling to like a writer, I do think that makes sense rather than um, in Syft 2.0, rather than returning a slice of artifacts and a slice of packages, maybe a cataloger takes an interface to like an SBOM writer, and every time it finds a thing, it tells the SBOM writer about it.
There is
That
a Syft.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, please continue. I was done.
There is a Syft 1.0 like equivalent that I think came up in a conversation. So like originally when we were talking about like this SBOM writer that can support spooling and would, so scanning a whole machine is a lot easier, more and less resource intensive. Originally we were like, it's got to be Syft 2.0 because the cataloger interface has to change. And then there was this like aha moment of, well, actually, what we care about is not. So this could be an incremental step. Is the main point. What we care about is that we don't gather all of the results from all catalogers all at once in memory. And it might be okay as a step one to say, let the catalogers return their packages and relationships for a single cataloger, and then immediately write that into this SBOM writer. So in other words, like leave the cataloger interface alone. Let it still return these raw results in the signature the way it's doing. But in the package cataloging task that we have today, which is all internal, we can make like any changes that we want to there, and it's not breaking. We could start experimenting with this SBOM writer object that can optionally spool out. But that would be the point where we say like add packages, add relationships every time it called a cataloger and it got the results back. Anyway, it looks like there is a spot in Syft 1.0 to probably do this incrementally. In Syft 2.0, we could probably even promote that further through, like, change the cataloger interface to take that writer instead of having to, return the incremental results. So return the partial results.
That's a cool idea. Okay, so these are less less sort of tightly coupled than I thought, because that might be worth doing anyway. To have like, we could build like a disk caching spooling SBOM writer implementation today, and people would use more temp file space and less RAM. Like, and it would give people another position on the like, how soon do you want it done? How much disk do you need? How much RAM do you need? Trade-off space that they could go to, and that people might really appreciate that. I thought that was blocked on Syfy too. Let's try to get back to these like multi-packages. One angle to approach it from is like, why do people want to why do people want this? And I have a couple reasons I want to throw out, but like it might be nice to try to do that. And if there's people watching who want to tell me I'm wrong and that I missed the most important reason, please do so. One of them is it's kind of confusing, right? Right now you run Syft and you see what look like totally redundant packages in the output, right? Like in the example earlier, it's like, do I really have a D package called Python 3 pip and a Python package called pip? I mean, yes, I do, but they're like, a human might consider them the same package, right? There's two different ways of installing pip. So I think part one is it's like a little bit confusing in the human output. And then I think the other use case I know that's pretty interesting is the vulnerability matching. Because like if we are on Debian or Ubuntu and we find like a D package, then we'll ask that distro feed what vulnerabilities are there for this package. And when we find a Python package, we ask GitHub security advisories what vulnerabilities there are for the package, and we get different answers, which means we can lead to a situation where like the D package is vulnerable and the PyPy package is not, and that gives us a positive. Or the D package is not vulnerable and the PyPy package is, and that gives us a positive. Or neither are, and that gives us no vulnerability. Or both are, and that gives us two vulnerabilities. And we get a lot of false positive reports that are from that situation where like somebody installed an OS, like a distro package that included a language package, and there's a vulnerability for the language package that their distro has patched, and then they come and complain to us that we're not interpreting their distro's feed right, when in fact like the RPM matcher in Grype said no, that's not vulnerable, and it's the PyPy matcher that doesn't know about the Red Hat specific patch or the SUSE specific patch that declared that the package was vulnerable. So I think that like enabling, one of my goals with doing this is enabling Grype to consider sort of like packages that are logically the same in aggregate when deciding the vulnerable status. In other words, it would be nice for me to say like, okay, like SUSE have patched this vulnerability and this person got this package from SUSE. Like, therefore, it's not vulnerable, even if there's technically, it looks like there's a Python package that falls in the GHSA vulnerable range. Right now, we have a hard time with that particular type of match, and it leads to a lot of false positives. So I think for my money, that's right, that was a really long answer. But the two main use cases I see for 3485 are better matching, sort of like the matching of these like related packages are aware of each other. And then the other one is like it's less surprising to people. People see like that SBOM is smaller and less redundant.
The last one highly resonates because I mean, like one philosophy we have is we keep dependency graphs like separate. And then, so if you have like a project A and project B and they sit next to one another in a file tree, but they share the same dependencies, like logically, like the same name, same version of stuff. In actuality, you do not have one like dependency tree, but like a lot of tools, they will merge that together because, you know, you get fewer nodes. It looks a little better and easier to grok. But in actuality, like it is useful to know that I have two projects and that their dependency trees don't actually overlap. However, I think it's back to that same point again, right? Like I think you can find folks in both camps. Yeah, it's great to make certain that we do keep them separate and we have that option. But I think there's a lot of folks that are saying, I don't, if I have 2,000 you know, packages in my project and like in actuality, it doesn't, like regardless of like the dependency tree semantics, like if I look at the names and versions and it's really like, you know, 1,500, I want to see only 1,500 because I have, you know, so many things to look at already. So that is definitely something we've heard a few times over.
Right. Well, and do we do a good job? Like you can imagine, like if you have two packages open, but both like you have two source repos open, but both repos like expect to link against libSSL. Like in fact, the dependency graphs might overlap there, right? The libSSL that's available at build time on that machine might be that literally the same package for both.
Yeah. For binaries, we do detect that. Yeah. If the shared lib is there and like we see an executable that has like a claim to link, then yeah, we'll make that relationship.
That makes sense. Are there any use cases we're missing for these like merged packages or for non-merged packages?
I'd say I think I've heard everything described in our discussion that I've heard in the past. I can't think of anything else specifically.
So if I think there's one other thing about 3485 that's worth double clicking on. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've convinced ourselves, yes, it's probably worth doing. And depending on the implementation details, maybe it could be done in Syft 1.0, we haven't fully convinced ourselves of that. I kind of want to click on the details here. Actually, what's on the screen now is like one aspect of this. I think this came out of a discussion from Keith and I about looking at the metadata as well. We don't want to drop metadata. If we decide that we merge packages into one, what happens with the metadata? Because they're usually completely different. And so we thought about adding something like what's on the screen right now, like a type join metadata that gets assigned into the metadata of the merged package, and it has basically a map of a coordinate. So where I looked at a file to parse it, and then the metadata itself. So imagine if I had I merge a Python package in RPM. So this would be the RPM database, and it would be the wheel egg metadata that's found in a site packages directory. We decided we merge these together. So now we would have instead of in the metadata either one of those structs, we would instead have this map that says, well, at this location I found wheel egg metadata, and at this location I found RPM database entry information. And so we'd be able to keep both. The upside of this is that we can introduce it. There isn't a place today where we're doing this kind of merge. So any use case we add would be technically non-breaking. I think there's room for argument here, because if we could also convince ourselves that no, this is a new metadata type that we don't know how to parse. So we could be breaking someone today. It's somebody who's saying, I'm interested in all Python wheel egg metadatas. They would not be able to access it the way that they're doing so today. They would have to know to interpret this join metadata type.
So given the example that I gave earlier, I thought I'd try it. So I've built a Docker container that basically does apt install Python pip and Python 3 requests, and then does a pip install request. Now this is a stupid example, but it's the example that I suggested earlier. And when you run Syft on it, it does the right thing. It does find the Python package for requests, and it also finds the deb, because they're two, we've got the requests here that was pulled in via pip, and then you've got Python 3 request that was pulled in as a deb. But interestingly, we've also got pip in there as well, which I don't know where it got that idea from, because that's there. So yeah.
Well, right. And that's go ahead.
Yeah. Pip is in the site packages directory is the short answer. So therefore it found it as a valid Python package. So
right.
And so
this is exactly an example of that kind of, yeah.
Right. And if we want to double click a little further, notice that there is more version information on Python 3 pip, right? So right now people have a complaint about pip that when you people are complaining about the way pip resolves packages with regards to external additional repository URLs. So if you have a private ipy.org instance, there can be some confusion there. So let's imagine Ubuntu have patched that. So now there's a CVE reported against pip, and we're going to match, Grype is going to consider the pip 24.0 vulnerable and consider the Python 3 pip 24.0 plus whatever Ubuntu did to it not vulnerable.
Well, we can see that they have patched it, because the version number there indicates that Ubuntu have touched it over and above whatever they got from the Debian package upstream, and whatever Debian did above what came from upstream Python.
Right. And so one of the main outcomes I want from this is I want Grype to consider the deb matcher's opinion on whether Ubuntu says this is vulnerable to a CVE when it's deciding whether to print a vulnerability for the pip package. Right now, Grype doesn't have, there's nowhere for me to do that. All the matchers in Grype run separately, and those two packages don't know about each other. Keith is working on it, which is super awesome. But I think this merged metadata is an interesting one. I don't know that example, like, I don't know that there's really a current pip CVE that we'll find, but I'm sure if we install an old enough version of requests or something, we will find a problem.
Yeah, no doubt. Sorry to sidetrack you from that conversation with my silly example. I just felt like we needed to see what you guys were articulating out loud.
It is super helpful, because I think that it will be like much clearer to people listening at home who don't stare at Syft. I don't think you meant to run that command exactly like that, but I think
shoot. No, I didn't. I don't know why I typed that. Well done.
I do that all the time now because they both start with GR, and I type both of them all day, every day.
Wow. I'm glad it's not just me then. Yeah. So Python 3 pip has some mediums, and do we see pip in there as well? No. Okay.
Yeah.
So just the dibs.
Right. So that's interesting. That probably means that, right. So what that is telling us is that the Ubuntu vulnerability feed has CVEs about their deb of pip that the PyPy, that GHSA doesn't have about the PyPy package pib. I don't have any opinion on who's right. I haven't looked into it, but it's interesting that they gave different. Right, it's interesting that they gave different results. I think what's important is that we considered the same artifact from two different lenses and decided one was vulnerable and one wasn't. We're probably wrong in one instance.
Well, I mean, but this is exactly why in Syft we actually do our best in most circumstances to not suppress duplicate packages, because the use case downstream is different for everybody. Like vuln scanning is one use case, but like license is another use case, et cetera. Like you kind of don't know. And if we just started to drop some just for Grype's benefit, we're, it's biasing.
Right. Well, if we could imagine that the licensing is different still, like what if Ubuntu has a different permissions on their patch over pip than the upstream pip has? I don't know if that's true, but it's a situation we can easily imagine given the image we were just looking at, and we would want to be able to detect that.
We've spent about 40 minutes on this topic. I mean, it is a big topic. I get it, and it's covered like lots of issues and stuff. The only reason I bring that up is we only have like 10 or so minutes left, and there were a couple of issues that, like discussion topics and things that I think Tim mentioned. I can probably answer this question here. Talk about the OSS roadmap, and I wonder if I can just answer that directly. Like, we probably haven't got time to talk about that right now, but I think that would actually be a good thing that we should post on a regular basis on the Discourse. Like, have a, state of play, and here are things we're thinking about. Not necessarily, here are milestones and here are dates or anything like that, but make it more obvious how people can self-serve that kind of information, either from the GitHub projects or GitHub issues that people are working on, or assignments and stuff like that. Something that people can self-serve and find out what's going on, rather than us have to answer that question regularly. What do you think?
We have a roadmap tab in like the OSS project. It has not been updated for like this upcoming quarter. It's something that I need to do next. But I'd like to foreshadow like what is probably coming down the road before like we actually have a roadmap that's consumable that says so. I mean, so right now we're working on Grype DB v6 schema. We're trying to get the latest database schema out the door, and that opens up a bunch of other work. It also is one of the last like things that needs to be done before we can start considering Grype 1.0 work. So last year we got Syft to 1.0, so it's a stabilization milestone. And one of the things we want to work on, I don't know if it's going to be this quarter or next quarter, but it's going to be getting Grype to that same kind of stabilization milestone. We want to get it to 1.0, and what are the features that we deem need to be under there or want to be under there. But I think it's going to be one of like the big things on the roadmap coming up.
Okay. I didn't want to like divert you and have you like spend the final 10 minutes talking about the roadmap. I just wanted to figure out if we could have a way of exposing that, like a prominent link somewhere that people can self-serve. Probably it would be more ideal rather than.
Yeah,
Here's
we can,
I'm gonna throw in the chat the link to the current tab that needs to be updated, but yeah, it's that our existing
yeah,
GitHub project that has a roadmap tab.
right. And so the view of like the GitHub issues and stuff, like the GitHub project that we use for like our backlog and stand-ups and stuff is public. Like this is it. You can go look at it. And so that's probably the quickest way to get an answer of what we're doing. Like all issue trackers, it's slightly wrong. Um, but it's close. So that would be the first thing there.
Yeah. I meant to clean it up at the end of December and to start afresh for January. I didn't get a chance to do that yet. So
No worries. I've put that link as a reply. I've started a reply to the
Yeah.
January 9th thread, and I've put that link in there. But yeah, we'll figure out a way to surface that, whether it's we'll figure that out.
Yeah. And then I think Tim's other request on there, which is a reasonable one, is to take a minute to try to answer some unanswered questions from like if we have like GitHub threads that are where the ball is in our court, or um uh like discourse threads. I think I have a discourse where I owe Tim in particular an answer, and I haven't succeeded. But
So you said
yeah,
GitHub issues where people are waiting on a reply from us, that kind of thing.
yeah. I think that sounds like that's what he's alluding to. I just dropped a link in the meeting chat to a topic. Maybe we can answer for Tim really quickly.
Sweet, thank you.
question about identifying base image layers.
Yeah, so if you scroll up, sorry, that's the very end. I asked him to clarify the question, and so I think my post there has a good, like, an example, right? So this is the like I do,
Nice.
right? Like in that, I think he's more interested in stuff that comes from the third and fourth statement in the Docker file than in stuff that comes from the first. And it can be a little tricky to tell, is what the core of this question is.
Wait, sorry. Let me double click on something. Are we talking about being able to identify the first layer, like knowing that it's Ubuntu latest versus all the other user layers, or just being able to say I can partition packages that come from the first layer versus all other layers?
Well, let's see. I don't know if there's a way to identify base layers. I thought we had a long issue about this, and I couldn't find it.
15.
Is it really issue 15? Maybe I didn't go far enough
seriously?
back in time.
What, like Syft 15?
I'm pretty certain.
Oh my gosh, we've been there before.
Because I believe Tim has taken a crack at implementing what one of these. So let's just talk about the user scope or user squash scope, both of those. And Tim has a PR open where he took a crack at doing that. I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And we ran into. Okay, yeah, thank you. There was a few like implementation issues that we ran into, and we were trying to understand like what was the next step for it. And I think it's probably where this question is kind of coming from.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah, we talk about this
a
lot.
So the TLDR of the problem, like, so when it comes to like files and layers, like being able to say, I know that this file comes from this layer versus the other. So being able to identify what comes from the base layer, what comes from other layers, it's actually really easy. You can do that with stereoscope very trivially, but the files is not enough here. So packages is like really the important part here. I'll take an example. Say I install a Python package in the base layer, and then I install it up in another layer. It's really easy to tell that I installed it originally on the first layer and installed it on the next layer up, because I can see that there's one file. It's this wheel egg metadata file, and that file represents only a single package, the package I installed. It doesn't represent any other package. So it's easy to say, this package was first introduced in this layer and it was modified in this other layer. Where it gets tricky is when we're talking about files that represent lots of packages. Think RPM database. RPM has a single database file that represents all the things installed on the machine. And every time you install a new package via RPM, that file gets mutated. And so from a Docker perspective, that means that you're taking that database, you're copying it up to the next layer, and then all the modifications are being done to that file. So that new file is wholly copied and mutated. So, okay, if you have 100 packages and you added 1 or added 10 in one command, what that looks like from a file perspective is I just have 2 files across these 2 layers, but with no clear distinction of which packages came from which layers until you open up both and you do a full cataloging of those files. And this is where Chris's comment on May 23rd is really talking about it. So he's saying, well, like from a package, this has to be operated on. We don't know how to do this without doing this from a package perspective, which is like take all the packages we discovered from, one scope and all the packages discovered from this other scope, and then just do this subtraction logically to say, everything that is in the user layer that is above the base layer is the first SBOM minus what we got from the base layer. So it's basically doing the scan twice. And we have this open question of like, is there a way to do this without doing the whole scan twice? And Tim's PR takes a stab at that, I'm pretty certain.
Right.
This one.
Yes.
And by twice, do you actually mean n times, like n for each layer?
It depends on the scope in question. So like the scope that's attempted. Well, okay. So there at the very top of issue 15, it talks about this as a user scope, which is I only care about what the user has added. And so there's really 2 things to subtract. It's base versus everything above that. But you're right. If you're trying to understand a slightly different but similar answer to a question, which is where was the first layer every package was introduced, you kind of run into that combinatorial, like, n many times you need to do that scan and subtraction, unless there's a better way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question or whatever statement is like, I don't think so. That base layer could have a number, or base image could have a number of layers, right? We don't know how many layers it has. And then the user stuff has a number of other layers, and we don't know how many layers are there. And if I remember correctly, there really wasn't a way for us to tell which of those layers correlated to like the base layer for a Docker build.
From locally, so from the registry's perspective, like what you're saying is true. Like you have your base image has a bunch of layers, that's base image has a bunch of layers, et cetera. It's turtles all the way down. But from like locally, if you do like Docker image save, the base layer is always like your from line in the Docker file. So that's always guaranteed to be of size 1, even if that base image, if you go to the registry, has like n many blobs associated with it. But when you're doing yeah.
Okay. So like when I go look at, even if I take like a Docker image, like this one that, like, even if I take a Docker image that has like a billion layers and I put it as my from line, and then I do stuff like the Docker file, like the actual OCI blob that gets written compresses this down to 1 layer. That like my from line is always 1 layer. Is that what you're saying?
I'm pretty certain that's how that works. I'm actually going to.
This is quite possibly the worst container you could have picked for this, by the way.
Well, I mean, we wanted an example of a base image with multiple layers, and this has 143 layers, which is more than 1. So, or sorry, 89 layers. I apologize. Which is definitely more than 1. So we did the assignment. A lot of distros they bake where they basically take like, whatever their user space is, and then like untar it into a single layer, right? Like a lot of distros are built that way. And so you go look at it and there's just like a single 400 meg layer. But that is not what Red Hat did here.
I'm sorry, but we have reached the top of the hour. I'm really sorry because I feel like we could talk about this stuff for a lot longer, and I feel like we've rambled around a few things, and we haven't got conclusions on many of them because they're big, like gnarly topics.
Yeah, let me.
I did add
Can-
some comments based off the discussion to one of the threads, so it's at least so we've nudged it along. So
Yeah. Okay, so that's the like the like many packages, the merge many packages thread. It's like we all want to do something there, but I think no one has a clear idea of what. And I think the answer to Tim's question of like what we're working on is like we're trying to get GrypeDB schema v6, partly because the downloadable artifact is like a third as big, which is going to be really helpful. There are also other improvements we can do. And then the answer to why haven't we made it so that you can exclude packages from the base layer is because single files like RPM's DB get modified every time you add it. It's very hard. It's very easy to say what layer a file came from. But if your evidence of a file is if your evidence of a package is in a file that gets modified on every step or like gets modified repeatedly, it's very hard to say what layer a package came from, which is really the question of interest. So anyway, just trying to do a quick recap there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've also replied to this with a list of all the topics, and in theory, these timestamps should take you to the part of the video that we talked about those things. That's the hope.
Excellent.
So, that's the theory anyway. These are the links to the things we talked about. Thank you, guys. Sorry it was a bit of a rush at the end there, and we're a little over time. I think it's a bit rusty since the last time we did one of these. We'll do better next time, I promise. Any final words before I close things down?
Yeah, one more word. Don't believe the last thing I said. I think I said it a little too confidently, a little too quick. So a little testing locally shows I need to brush up on what happens there. So I take that back, Keith.
So your base, your from line in your Docker file does not necessarily make one OCI layer on the build. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I just try. Yeah, with the Docker image, say based off of a quick build off of the image I get.
And on that bombshell, we're going to have to leave it.
I didn't want to get away with it.
Yeah, tune in again next time to find out what the real answer is. Thank you, chaps. Lovely to see you all again. And everyone, subscribe and jump on our discourse and berate us for get stuff wrong. That's fine. And we'll see you next time. Lovely to see you all again, chaps. See you all next time. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.